everybody. Thanks for coming to the learning lunch today. My name is Carrie Buck, and I'm a Medicaid Quality Specialist here at the County Board. Probably most of you know me from doing these learning lunches because I usually sign people in. Somehow I got tricked into talking, so here it goes. So sexuality in persons with DD. I am not an expert in this, but I did attend a training on it that I thought was really interesting and gave a lot of good information that I wanted just to share with you guys today. Before I was a Medicaid Quality Specialist, I was an SSA for about 13 years. So I had people on my caseload that sexuality and sex and all those things, did come up over the course of my years of working with them. So I have a little bit of experience in the field from that perspective, and then also this training, so it's kind of a collaboration of everything that I know about it. This is the Seneca Institute is where I took the training, and it was actually online. They have a lot of interesting stuff on there, and it's not that expensive. So that's kind of where I got some of this information. And so just another disclaimer, I'm not an expert. I don't claim to be an expert. I don't want to be an expert. So just keep that in mind. So what is sexuality? According to the dictionary, sexuality is the state of being sexual, having sex, sexual activity, expressing your sexual interests or desires. That's one definition of sexuality. The World Health Organization has a much broader definition. They say that sexuality includes sex, but it also includes your gender, your identity and role, your sexual orientation, your eroticism, your intimacy, reproduction, includes all of those things. And they go on to say that it also, sexuality also includes like your thoughts and your fantasies and your desires and your beliefs and your attitudes and your values. All of these things can help determine what your sexuality is. And then they also recognize that while it can include all of those things, not everybody always experiences all of those things. So I think probably just in society, as we know it now, sex is everywhere, right? I mean, you always hear about it. So it's definitely a hot topic. So why should we talk about this, do you guys think? Why did you guys want to come and hear about this today? What are you guys kind of hoping for? Why is this important to cover? Any reason it's important to have? Yeah, absolutely. And it's complicated, right? I mean, it's a complicated topic in our own personal lives and the people we serve too. So that's why it's important to be talked about and important to be addressed. There's also a lot of very scary statistics too. So 83% of women with disabilities will be sexually assaulted in their life. Only 3% of people with developmental disabilities that are abused actually report it. So that's a staggering low percentage. Women with a disability are far more likely to have a history of undesired sex, 19.7% versus 8.2%. So, and 80% of women and 30% of men with developmental disabilities have been sexually assaulted. So it's unfortunate and it happens. And I'm hoping that maybe talking about sexuality and talking about sexuality with the people we serve, can maybe help reduce some of these statistics. It would be nice if it would, hopefully. So things we're not going to talk about today: sexual offenders, unlawful sexual conduct.
The Shawnee bus is out front for unloading.
Sexual assault, rape, sexual abuse, victimization, signs of abuse, all of those things. Mostly we're not talking about that today because I'm not qualified to talk about that today. Those are things that someone with more experience and more knowledge should address. Not only that, but we also can't talk about all that in an hour. So when thinking about sexuality and people with DD, I think it's first important to kind of talk about and look at our history. Carrie Buck was one of the first court cases who was ordered to have mandatory sterilization because she was feeble-minded. The court ruled 8-1 in favor of her to be forced to be sterilized because she was unfit, because she had a developmental disability. That's a picture of Carrie there, and that's her mom, Emma. There was also a Lifetime movie. I think it was like in the late 80s, early 90s. So I don't know if you can still see it anymore, but I think it'd be interesting if you could. I think you'd be interested to watch it. But so this was in 1924 that this court case took place. And it was believed at that time that people with disabilities should not have kids because they will pass along their disability to their children. That was what they believed back in the 1920s. So, we know now that that's not true, but that's what they thought. And this court case was largely seen, like in this time period, as an attempt to improve the human race. Sometimes the word is eugenics. I don't know if any of you have heard that before. Anybody heard of eugenics or what that means, or who used eugenics in our history? So eugenics is pretty much trying to weed out in this case, the defectives from the gene pool to have a better race is kind of what eugenics is. Adolf Hitler was the one who used eugenics for. They are. There is a huge thing right now in, I think it is Sweden. Yep, they are. They're trying to find the gene or whatever that is the gene for Down syndrome, and then they're trying to, eliminate that from their population. Yeah, that's exactly a good example. So states continued to practice these sterilizations into the 70s, which I think is the 70s weren't that long ago. I mean, it's getting to be a long time ago, but I don't know, I feel like the 70s is just 30 years ago, not 50, but. And I think it's interesting that the Supreme Court never expressly overturned Buck versus Bell. So I think that's interesting and sad. So during this time period, lots of books were published promoting this eugenics idea and giving warning about, we have to protect our society. And there was one study in 1920 that specifically said that the national problem of the mental defective, and specifically stated that the mentally defective are those who are not able to have a home and for whom the only permanent parent is the state. So again, that was kind of their thinking back in the 1920s. And when you think about the only permanent parent is the state, guess what else was happening during this time? Any guesses? Institutionalizations started happening during this time. This is when they kind of started telling families who had kids with disabilities, oh, you have to send them away because, you can't take care of them or whatever. So that was also happening around this time. If you ever want to look at the National Center for biotechnology information. It's interesting, they have like this whole big history of the field of DB. So this is just parts that apply to this, but they have some interesting information. So in California, again, during the same time period, there was a publication called Sterilization for Human Betterment. And it was the whole book was about 6,000 people, women, in California that were forced to be sterilized. And again, their whole thinking was that if you have a disability, you needed to be sterilized, or else you would have children with disabilities. Which again, we know is not true, but that's what they knew back then. Here's just a copy of what it looked like. I just thought it was interesting to see. So in 1911, Woodrow Wilson, who later was the president, he's the one that signed a sterilization bill that went into law. Again, the same kind of thing, just saying that, sterilization is what we need to do. So this is a long quote, but I'll kind of summarize it, and this is something I think is interesting, is that the eugenics movement, started in the United States, and Adolf Hitler is the one who kind of picked that up and kind of ran with it. And the Sterilization for Human Betterment, that picture that I just showed you, was reprinted in 1933. So in Germany, they started doing involuntary sterilization 27 years after the United States started doing it. So I just think that just makes me feel sick in my stomach to know that, something that we were doing here in the United States is what Hitler then ran with and did in his country. Yeah, they don't do that in school, you're right. So and like I said, this website just has a lot of interesting information about it. So thankfully, times have changed a lot, thank goodness. On one of the handouts that I gave you when you came in, it's called the position statement is what it's called at the top. And this is something that the ARC put out and has on their website. And just to show why this was so much needed, it says at the very top, for decades, people with intellectual disabilities or developmental disabilities were thought to be asexual, that they had no need for loving, fulfilling relationships with others. And so now they're saying, no, that's not true. Every person has the right to exercise their choices regarding their sexual expression, their sexual relationships, what they're looking for. So all people, us, everybody, has the right to develop friendships, emotional and sexual relationships where they can love and be loved, dignity and respect, privacy, confidentiality. People have the right to sexual expression and education that reflect their own culture, religious, moral values, all those things. So this is definitely a lot different than what it was in the early 1900s, thank goodness. So now I think it's, we kind of did a very quick history of then and now and where we're at today. I think it's important to look at ourselves and how we think about sexuality and the people that we work with. I become uncomfortable seeing people with developmental disabilities displaying affection to each other. Those are just things to think on in your own perspective and your own thoughts. Do you see sexualized behaviors as a problem, not necessarily an expression of a person's needs? We'll talk about that one in a minute. Do you become paternalistic or maternalistic to individuals to protect them? Are you overprotective? Just some kind of things to think about in our own lives and how we feel about people with developmental disabilities expressing their sexual desires. So let's talk about the sexualized behaviors first. Could it be that our attitudes and our beliefs and our experiences cause us to misinterpret situations? We'll look a little bit more into that. If somebody is stripping off their clothes, is it an expression of their sexuality? Maybe. Or could it also be that their clothes are too hot, or they're too tight, or the tag's bothering them? Just because someone is stripping doesn't necessarily mean that it's a sexualized behavior and they're trying to, pull a move on you or anything. I mean, it could be that, but also could be the clothing. Again, if they're exposing themselves, like, are they doing it as, in a sexual way, or is it that their expression of, hey, I need to go to the bathroom? Especially people that can't communicate as well. Masturbation, again, could be sexual, but it also could be boredom, frustration, inappropriate touch, could be not understanding boundaries. Some people aren't taught boundaries. They don't know that, you don't hug the mailman when they come, Requests for hugs and kisses, are they trying to make out with you? Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe they're expressing their need for physical contact. So when we think about these kinds of behavior that is seen as sexual, we also have to consider, could there be an alternate explanation? Could it be one of these things? Could it be something else? So that's kind of something to keep in mind. And there's some other things to consider also. Like, is it normal for this person to do this? That can be maybe one of the things you can use to determine, is this a sexualized behavior, or is this just a behavior that has sexual components but it's not meant to be, sexual? Is there a trigger for the behavior? Maybe it's every rayon shirt they wear, they have to take off because they don't like the feel of it on their skin. Like, are there triggers that maybe we don't think of or haven't really looked at? Who is the behavior really affecting, and is it harmful to self or others? An example of this, somebody who likes to disrobe a lot, if they're at home and they're in their room and they're not bothering anybody, like, is it that big of a deal? Is it they're sitting out in the living room and their roommates are uncomfortable about it? Okay, then, we need to address that. Does it limit access to the community? Yeah, you can't go to the store when you're naked, so all things to kind of consider. Any questions or comments or thoughts about any of those things? So when you're working with someone and they, are interested in sex or want to, have a girlfriend or boyfriend, that's what I would always hear a lot in teen meetings. I want a boyfriend. I want a girlfriend. I want to go on a date. Informed consent is a big topic. Anybody can tell me what informed consent is? It's making decisions after you have been fully informed of all the facts, all the benefits, the risks, and all of the alternatives. After you know all of those things, only then can you make a decision for yourself, and that's considered informed consent. Informed consent is also used a lot as a medical term, like before surgeries and stuff, you have to give informed consent, that, hey, I'm gonna do the surgery, I know I might, have a heart attack on the table, but I'm taking that risk, or whatever, so. Has to do with making decisions. So some things to consider when thinking about informed consent with the people that we work with, perhaps could be education. Do they really going back to the topic of sex, do they really understand how sex works and body parts and names and all that kind of stuff? Do they understand the potential risks of pregnancy, STDs, things like that? do they understand that they have a choice? They don't have to have sex, they can say no. Biological age versus mental age, just making sure to consider, yeah, he's a 55-year-old man, but maybe he doesn't understand, like, has it been explained to him in a way that he can understand, what he's being talked about. And then, of course, there's guardianship issues, too, for folks. So all of these things are things to consider when people are looking at, wanting to have sex and being with the opposite sex or the same sex or whoever. Some more kind of ideas on informed consent and if somebody really understands or not. Like, can they say no? And do they, a lot of people say, like, oh yeah, I know I can say no, but do they say no to things, And can they stop? If another person says, hey, do you want to do this? Like, and the person says, yeah, and then they say no, like, do they know to stop? Like, that's another thing to consider. And again, understanding the consequences of, yeah, you could get pregnant, but let's look at that a little bit further. I mean, that means that you're going to be pregnant for 9 months. That means you're going to have a baby. That means you're going to have to take care of it. I mean, like, kind of walking through all of the steps. If the individual is able to ask for help, understanding, or if they have questions, do they have somebody they can go to talk about maybe concerns or questions they have? Can they identify appropriate times and places to be intimate with other people? Can they recognize a situation that might pose a threat? There's lots of situations that could, be not that good of an idea, Can they understand that and recognize that? So this is not anywhere near an exclusive list of things to consider, but all good things to kind of think about when trying to determine, like, okay, are they able to make this decision, and can the other person make this decision? Everybody kind of understanding, I guess, this. So there's some things that you guys can do as staff to help with this. How many of you felt like you got good sexual education from your parents? Anybody? Anybody feel like they didn't? Like, why or why not? Like, what did you wish, like, geez, like, I wish they would have even said anything about it, or, like, any comments or questions on that? People that did have good sex education, are you happy for that? Like,
Mom and dad were rural, when they had me. So
Okay, sure.
that makes it easier to talk to them about.
Sure, absolutely. That's an excellent point. Yeah.
A lot of schools have that sex education program too, where they take you behind the closed curtains, and that's how it was when I went to school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. So then here's a question then, do people with developmental disabilities get that same kind of education?
No.
I'm guessing no. Definitely probably not. So some things that, you guys can do to just help people become aware of their sexuality, know about sexuality, be appropriate with sexuality, all of those things. One thing is, like, teaching proper names of body parts, like not using slang, but actually telling people, explaining bodily functions, like, yes, this is normal, or, whatever. Teaching good self-care, hygiene, actually those two can really easily go together, like while you're helping them in the shower, using proper terms and things like that. Helping people to make their own choices and helping them practice doing this. And again, this doesn't even have to be in regards to sexuality at all. This could just be teaching them how to choose what menu item they want to order. Help them to choose, do you want to go here or do you want to go here? Like, which store do you want to go to? Instead of just kind of making those decisions for them, or just kind of assuming, like, oh, this is where they always like to go, so they'll probably want to go here. like help them to actually practice that. And I think the more that you practice that empowerment, I think the better that people get at it. And then people are better equipped to use it in other situations too. So that's a real easy thing that can be done, that you can do just pretty much in any setting really. And just, yeah, helping them kind of make decisions for themselves. Education about relationships, teaching them about the different types of relationships there are in the world, teaching them about social boundaries. Have you guys ever seen like the circles training? Ever done it or know about it? It's really easy, but it's something that's possibly could be helpful. I thought it could be helpful anyways. So like, you draw a circle and you put them in the middle. And then you kind of talk them through all these different circles of boundaries. So like in this dark blue here is intimate relationships. You know, talk with them about if they have a boyfriend or girlfriend now, you know, like, okay, well, what kinds of things is okay in this circle? Is kissing okay? Is sex okay? Like, what's okay, what's not okay? And then in the light blue is family. You know, like, okay, what's appropriate interactions with your family? I mean, maybe you have a family that hugs all the time, maybe you have a family that doesn't. It's different for every person. But this just kind of helps them identify what they want, what they expect. And then, you know, friends, like, again, do you hug friends? Do you not hug friends? Do you do high fives? What do you do? What do you expect? What are you comfortable with? And then acquaintances, and then strangers. So, again, you know, like for the mailman, you might say hi when they deliver your mail, right? But you probably don't hug them, right? So then you can have that conversation about, no, the people you hug, remember they're in this circle, you know? So just kind of helping see the different kinds of relationships there are in the world and just what is appropriate kinds of interactions with people. You know, then obviously with strangers, you know, you don't just give people your telephone number or invite them over to your house and things like that. So might be something worth trying, you know. You have somebody that kind of struggles with that boundary issue or, you know, hugging and, you know, or when it's not appropriate, things like that. Other things that could be helpful in the area of sexuality. Social skills, teaching manners, being polite, appropriate, you know, ways to interact with others, like we just said. How to handle rejection if somebody says no. That's a huge one. I mean, do people ever really explain, like, hey, you know, gosh, I'm sorry that you know, girl doesn't like you, but, you know, you have to respect her wishes and there's more fish in the sea, you know, like, how teaching people how to handle that, because some people don't know. And then also, you know, that's a good discussion area too about teaching manners and politeness, like not only just because that's a nice thing to do, but because, you know, like, hey, if you want to attract somebody that you're, you know, trying to attract, you know, you want to be, you know, a gentleman or a lady or whatever. So there's lots of different ways you could go with that. Social opportunities, teaching people how to make new friends. Helping them get involved in activities just to help meet people. Again, like, I think, you know, people, like, I don't think anybody ever sat us down to say, hey, here's how you make a friend, step one, you know. We just kind of do it, and we just kind of know, and we learn, you know, through growing up in school and whatnot. But maybe kind of helping more directly in that area of ways to, hey, you know, if you want to have a good friend, you got to be a good friend, all those kinds of things. Just providing that education to help people. Another thing too is just helping support their individual rights. Make sure that people with disabilities aren't being discriminated against. And again, that's in sexuality, but that's in all areas of life. Providing opportunities to learn, participate in daily life, make decisions, kind of what we had already discussed. Balancing risks versus rights. So this is a big one. We could probably do a whole hour on rights versus risks, right? Is there any of you sitting here thinking, okay, that sounds good, Karen, but what if Joe, who I'm working with, wants to have the stranger over to have sex in the house? What am I supposed to do, right? You know, that could happen. And it's a fine line, it really is, between making sure that they have been educated on the risks. You know, this could happen, this could happen, this could happen. Their rights, you don't have to do this, you can say no. And just trying to help make sure that they are making the best choice that they can. It's a tricky situation, it really is. Yeah, I was just gonna say that, I guess I was gonna ask, how many of you guys ever made a mistake in your life? How many of you learned from that mistake? Like, oh, we'll never do that again. How many of you made a mistake, learned from your mistake, and then made the same mistake again? Right? We all do that. People that we serve do that too. You know, sometimes it takes a while to learn and find out. You know, I guess think of your days, your dating days. You know, and do I like that type of guy or don't I like that type of guy? Or I don't like that type of guy, but I'll try that again, and oh, it's still bad. You know, I mean, like you just not to pick on you guys. So rights versus risks is big, and I think that's why just talking about it is so important, because I think it's one of those things that's easily kind of just like brushed under the rug, like, oh, they have a disability, they don't care about having a boyfriend or girlfriend, or they don't care about that, but they do, a lot of them do. And so balancing, making sure that they're making informed choices, and but also letting them take chances, you know. It's hard, like I said, it's a fine line, and I think definitely using your supervisors, your people that you're working with, the teams that you're on, just like trying to, like, hey, this is what they're saying. What are you guys saying? You know, I mean, working together is definitely important, because you're not in this alone, having to make this decision, or trying to figure out what to do to help somebody. And again, encourage informed and independent decision making. But I think a big thing is keeping your opinion out of it. Like, I think for me, when I was in SSA, I was one of the earlier slides, I was one that was probably more like overprotective, you know, because I didn't want my people to get hurt, you know. But how much of that is me trying to protect them versus my own opinion about, well, this person wants to date that guy, but I know that that guy has a new girlfriend every week, you know what I mean? So how much of it is me overprotecting them, and yeah, and helping use agency, you know, policy to help guide you. Do you guys have policies about this at your workplace? Do you know? I mean, probably everybody don't have sex with clients, right, at their workplace.
Yeah.
So there are probably some other rules around it. That might be something to consider looking into, and we're seeing what's written. And even if you know, they have something in writing, like, what's your own personal kind of policy about it? You know, like, what have you decided about, like, if somebody comes up and gives you hugs, is that okay, or is that not okay? You know, are you comfortable with it, or are you not comfortable with it? You know, and kind of thinking about those kinds of things too is important. And then teaching the people that we work with the boundary of that. Like, hey, you know, like, I really like you, but I'm not a hugger, you know, so I prefer handshake or high five or whatever. Some people will hug anybody, you know, and that's okay. And if you're comfortable with that, fine, you know, but just making sure you kind of have your own personal policy and boundaries and what you kind of expect or want or want to see. And then, yeah, like I said, use people that are around you to support you and kind of try and help determine these things, because like we said at the beginning, it's complicated, it really is. It's complicated, it's tricky, and like all the things that we didn't cover today, you know, there's also like all those other things about, you know, like, what if this person, you know, is a sex offender, and what if this person, you know, has a history of this, and definitely a complicated issue. I think I've got changed my slide there. Any questions or comments or issues, scenarios that you're dealing with now that, without revealing any names, or any failure stories, like I tried something like that and it was awful, you know, anything that you guys, yeah, go ahead.
We had a situation years ago where we was to teach somebody safe sex.
Mm-hmm.
So members of the county board suggested that we teach them how to put a condom on a banana.
Uh-huh.
My thing was, they put a condom on the banana and still get in trouble when they had sex.
Mm-hmm.
So, have we moved on past that? I mean, is there other ways to teach somebody appropriate safety without using fruit?
Right, right.
Does the board offer anything to an adult with disabilities who has interest in having sex that doesn't have any idea what's going on? I know a lot of companies, that's not something that they want to touch on.
Right, right. I know when.
That's their right.
If they're right, I'm
Yeah,
just saying,
yeah.
is there a place that educates
Yeah.
adults that are making
Right.
an informed decision to have sex?
Right. The county board doesn't have anything, although, when we were a part of Miramar Industries, we would utilize our nurse a lot, to do, she kind of had actually I think she did the circles training with folks and kind of did sex ed with people. So if there's like any nurses at your agency that might be willing to do that with somebody, or, even like I don't know, if a home health nurse would, you know, be willing to do something like that, possibly. Just kind of an idea maybe. But yeah, good questions, good thoughts.
Kind of throws you for a loop when they come asking questions, and it's like,
I'm sure.
oh, okay.
Well,
You don't want to be dishonest with them. I mean, they're people.
right, absolutely. And you guys are on the front lines. You guys are the ones getting those questions.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, oh crap, what do I say? Yeah, I think, yeah, like you said, you don't know, you just be honest. And,
There are some, I know there was a class that they used to be able to take.
oh, really?
I don't know exactly where it was at, but there used to be a class that they could take, because we had a girl that, at one of the homes that I worked in, that she had what they called a stimulator,
Mm-hmm.
because she had pelvic wall,
Oh, mhm.
pelvic stimulator, and she had to go through the sex ed class before she could get it.
Mhm.
Oh, huh. Huh. Do you remember what it was
I
at?
don't know.
Yeah,
We were just told that she had to go through the sex ed class, so.
yeah. Yeah.
Why would, with the statistics as high as they are for people who have been sexually abused or assaulted, why would there not be something offered by court or by the federal
Anybody.
government, or something so that these people are educated enough to know when they're being assaulted or?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question, because it does make me wonder, like, how many times were people, you know, sexually abused or whatever, that they didn't know what was going on, or that was.
Provider that, you know, oh, well, that's kind of attractive, kind of cute, or, you know, whatever.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And some of these people are thinking it was natural, or it was what was supposed to be.
yeah, that's, I guess that's how it is, you know, because they don't know any better. Absolutely, absolutely. Absolutely, and I'd be curious to know, like, you know, because regardless of if our parents talked to us about it or not, like, we probably did mostly have it in school, you know, some kind of basic sex ed or health or whatever. But I would be curious to know, like, I don't know if Miramore School does anything with students here or not. It'd be interesting to know. And it would also be interesting to know, like, in the public schools, you know, sometimes, yeah, for their quote unquote typical kids, but I wonder if they extend that to their folks on IEPs and other stuff. I don't know. But I think that's an excellent point, because why aren't people talking about this?
The numbers might be a lot lower if we both know what's going on.
Mm-hmm. And probably starting them young, learning that coming up versus now they're 50 and now you're trying to tell them how, you know, the appropriate boundaries, you know.
Yeah, I just wonder if they knew how many would come forward and say,
A lot more
my
than,
provider does that, you know?
Absolutely.
a lot more than 3%, I'm guessing.
Or maybe even, you know, they know that just because maybe it felt good to them, that it's still wrong. 'Cause I
Absolutely.
know with a lot, some even adults, you know, they don't think it's wrong if they got pleasure from it, so that can be part of it for some. They just don't understand.
Mhm.
Like, I liked it, so it wasn't like it was okay.
Yeah. And that's often even what an abuser uses, you know, like, well, you liked it just as much, so, you know, I mean, that's, yeah. I think it's definitely an area that's, you know, sex is all around us everywhere, anytime you turn on a TV or anything, you know, but then we don't really talk about it either. Or at least we don't talk about it in structured, helpful ways that maybe will help people. So I'm hoping that maybe some of these things will kind of give you ideas as you go and work with your folks to, you know, maybe address some of these things, or I don't know, kind of be more aware of kind of what's going on, how you can help them, things like that. That will hopefully then prevent some of these bad things from happening, and also just help them to have, you know, more fulfilling lives, because they are people just like you and I, and they want and need relationships just like you and I, and so it's definitely all something to keep in mind when working with folks. So, any other?
So what would you do if say they had contacted somebody on Facebook or something, or somebody had contacted them on Facebook and said, hey, let's meet up and do that, and they want to go?
Mm-hmm. I think, you know, well, a couple things. I mean, I think just talking with them first and saying, hey, you know, you don't even know this person, you know, is what?
I'm in love with them.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I know, it's hard because, and no matter what you say, they are convinced that they are in love with them, even though they don't know them.
They've got some reason that they want to go. How do you keep them safe from making that big mistake?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think all you can do is educate the best that you can, and try to, I would definitely get the team involved, like, hey, this is going on, this is what she's saying she wants to do. Is this okay or not? You know, like, what are we gonna do about this?
Well, and the team was the one that caused it.
That doesn't help any. Yeah, so, yeah, absolutely, it's hard. It is hard, because you don't want them to get hurt, you don't want them to be victims or whatnot.
They said they say, well, I've already done this, so it's not a big deal. It is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, and maybe one thing I didn't even talk about here that I probably could have added is, you know, just about like self-esteem and self-worth and respecting yourself, and that could be a big thing too, maybe to even just work on throughout, even before those kinds of situations arise, about, you know, you are valued, you are loved, you are, you know, worthy of good relationships, you are, you know, those kinds of things maybe leading up to it would help. But yeah, I could have added that in this presentation too. That would have been a good idea. Helping them see their value. So anyway, unless anybody else has any other thoughts or comments, we'll wrap up here. If you would, please fill out your evaluation form there, and if you want to just leave it on the table, I can come get them later. And then your certificates are back here on the table, so you're going to come out. Thanks for coming, everybody. Thank you. Oh, thank you. No problem.
When are you guys coming back?
That was a hard subject.
It was.